What's up, guys? It's Modern Craftsman
Monday. John's missing again.
So John
didn't even have lacrosse today.
He didn't. And unfortunately, well, we don't want to.
John was here intermittently. He just doesn't say anything, but he just continued
but now
to
everyone's
lie.
going to be like, I only tune in because I want to listen to John. And now we just lost everyone.
No, he's here intermittently, just in and out, and doesn't say anything. He's here in spirit.
Okay, so everyone decides to now stay. Well, this week, as you guys might know, we have Trent Preszler from Preszler Woodshop.
Not to be confused with the guy from 9 Inch Nails, Trent Reznor.
Yes, you did think that's who we were interviewing today.
I actually knew. I was just messing around.
I just don't know if I believe you right
now.
now.
I 100% knew.
Like, I feel like you're like, oh, he's kind of a craftsman. I heard he did some woodworking.
I think he does like scores for movies and stuff now too. But
does he?
It's the other Trent Reznor.
No, it's Preszler.
I know.
Well, you guys may have seen him on Instagram. If you follow anyone that builds canoes, he is probably the dude that you follow. He has made quite the name for himself in that, but come to find out, it's actually just a side gig. So
hell of a
stay
side
tuned.
gig.
Yeah, he even talks about how much money he sells these canoes for.
Oh yeah, that came pretty early on, but stick around for the whole thing. It's good. See,
yeah,
John's
we talk
back.
about. He is.
Yeah.
Can we?
See, he's been in and out the whole time.
See, people hear Johnny's voice and be like, all right, I'm listening to this one.
It's intermittent.
Yeah. But no, we talk about some serious, life related. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
We talk about a lot. The conversation
really
kind of runs the
important
gamut,
things.
and it's funny. I mean, it goes from business to mentors to father-son relationship to sexuality. It goes it touches on everything. Writing a book to selling a vineyard. Honestly, if you were to bullet point out this entire podcast, you'd be like, what the hell is going on right now?
But the one center is that no matter what, at any cost, it always comes back to quality.
Yeah. Which may not be the best financial decision you ever make, but you'll sleep well at night.
Well, unless you're on TikTok.
Yeah, that's true.
Guys, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Moulding and Millwork. So you have a print calling for James Hardy Artisan Siding, and you just found out they discontinued the line. What to do? Do what others are doing and move the specification over to Duration. Longer lengths, no required edge sealing, no clearance restrictions, easy and safe to work with, complementary moldings, and the authentic look of wood siding. And if you need a special reveal or profile, that's not a problem either. To learn more about Duration Polyash products, please visit their website at durationmillwork.com and be sure to check them out on Instagram. Trent, what's up, my man?
Hey, how you doing?
So,
Gosh.
I have been trying to get you on this podcast for 3 years, and you said we weren't good enough until a certain point.
I don't remember that. I don't know. I need to see the documents.
Okay. I'll pull up the DMs. No, I'm excited to have you on. Excited to talk directly. I feel like we've talked through DM for the last 3 years. Like I said, been asking to be on, and it hasn't aligned. And I think it was probably, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. I finally convinced you to do it, and you text me back, and you're like, "Hey, there's no openings until June." I was like, "Yeah, man. You snooze, you lose."
I know. Well, I sort of the timing ended up working out really great. Yeah, I thought, well, it'd be great to talk to you around the time that my book comes out.
Yeah.
And so here we are. But yeah, Instagram's a crazy thing. Like, I feel like I know you, and we've talked for so many years, and now here we are. And this was sort of a byproduct of launching the book too. I did quite a few conversations online with folks that I'd known for years on Instagram, and I think because of the pandemic, this is as real as it gets sometimes. So
which is wild.
It's fantastic. It's wild, right?
So Trent,
so here we are.
For those that don't know who you are, let's get a quick introduction.
Yeah. Well, my name's Trent Preszler. My Instagram is Preszler Woodshop. I build wooden canoes as kind of I guess, a side business to my main job, which is as CEO of a winery here on Long Island in New York. I have a PhD from Cornell in horticulture. I've always been in farming, agriculture. Grew up on a ranch in South Dakota, and about 7 years ago, my father passed away, and my inheritance was his toolbox and some of his tools from our cattle ranch in South Dakota. And I used that to build my first wooden boat. And that's really kind of how I got started in woodworking and building stuff. But my whole adult life, my whole career, I've been in the wine business and running vineyards. So this was a bit of a departure.
Did you have siblings that you had to fight for the to split the inheritance with?
No, I mean, actually, tragically, I have a sister who died at 26 around the same time. So which is also part of the whole story. But so no,
it's all yours,
all mine. Yeah, that toolbox. My dad was kind of a broke cattle rancher, and he was like a rodeo star back in the 60s, but went through a string of hard times and didn't have a whole lot. But here we are, and it definitely changed, the gift that changed my life. And years after I finished building my first canoe, I decided to write a book about it, and that's probably in part why we're here today chatting.
I would say, I would agree with it being in part of why.
Yeah.
And you were kind enough to actually send us a copy of the book. I'm the world's slowest reader, so I've not. I'm still trying to finish the one that I was reading prior to you sending it. But it's sitting on my nightstand, and I'm excited to read it. And I think it's interesting obviously through social media and hearing you talk about the fact that you got this toolbox, and you went from getting a toolbox where I feel like the majority of people would just kind of take that, put it in the garage, and maybe revisit it at some point. What was it that, how soon after getting that toolbox, did you get that toolbox knowing that you were going to do something with it?
Not really. No, I came home back to New York. I had a road trip to South Dakota in my car, and it was like the dead of winter. And I got back to Long Island. I live right on the ocean out here on eastern Long Island, and I was staring at the water in the middle of this historic blizzard in 2015. You probably remember because you live in Boston. We got 5 feet of snow that year. And I was basically trapped in my house for a week and thinking, how am I going to honor my dad and my sister? And what should I do with these tools? And since I lived on the water, through a whole series of kind of revelations and events, I decided to build a boat. But it wasn't like I had any idea what I was doing or knew what I was getting into. And probably if I did, I might not have done it. But I certainly didn't know when I got it, when I went back. And I actually saw Dad right before he died, and we talked about the tools just briefly. And he just said it was some stuff from the ranch that he wanted me to have. And my mom was really the one who said, we thought maybe you'd find a project or something to work on. Or Mom was like, maybe you'd make me a cutting board or something. So instead, I made a 20-foot wooden boat. But cutting board might have been easier.
Probably had to buy all new tools to make the boat too.
I did.
I can use 2 or 3 of these, and I need to buy everything else.
Yeah, and that's a chapter of the book where I had that realization, because I went into it thinking, oh sure, this I'm sure this toolbox has everything I need to build a boat, and it had almost nothing of what I needed to build a boat. So it just provided like the inspiration and the impetus to do something. And it's funny because a lot of people in interviews actually come into it thinking that that everything was contained in that toolbox that I needed to build a boat. And I say, well, I mean, here's the hammer or was the hammer, and here's the rasp and a few other choice little things. But, I was ripping strips of cedar and juniper like 20 feet long and routing them. And I had to buy power tools and make this, a real shop. But in part, that was kind of the gift from Dad too, where it was like, all right, how am I going to make this work? It's always been a sort of struggle to make things work in our family. And if you don't know how to do something, you had to just do it yourself.
Where did you start? I want to ask this question. The canoe that ended up, I believe it was over overseas somewhere, and there's beautiful photos of it floating in the water. Was that your first canoe, or am I incorrect thinking that?
No, the first one I did
Okay.
not sell. The first one is still in my shop, but I have sold subsequent canoes to private clients
Okay.
around the world, including Switzerland and the Hamptons and a few
So
other places.
Switzerland is
But
the one I'm thinking of. I remember
yeah,
seeing it shipped and then unboxed, and then they put it in this, I don't know, this surreal looking piece of water, and it was just,
yeah,
and I remember you talking about how much you sold it for, and people were commenting on it, and you were like, yeah, but it really doesn't equate to that much when you think about how much time I have into it. But
yeah,
the
yeah.
where did you even start? Like you decided to go the boat route, but how did you even start understanding what it was going to take to build it, or were you looking towards mentors or buying a book or?
Um, I had a couple of books. I did a lot of research. There was one book in particular that was it's called Building a Strip Canoe. It was published in the 70s or 80s by some old guy up in Maine, and it's more like an instructional
His
pamphlet
his
than it
dad
was a
died and
real
gave him a
book.
toolbox, right? That guy who wrote the book.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that exactly. He's probably built, I don't know, like something like
Holy
500
smokes!
canoes,
Wow.
that guy. And it was like these step-by-step instructions, almost like a cookbook. And then I Googled things. I looked on YouTube, and Nick Offerman and Jimmy DiResta had built a canoe a few years before, which Nick paddled on the last episode of Parks and Recreation. So I reached out to them and talked to them a little bit, but it was a lot of trial and error and kind of blind faith that if I just did this step by step, eventually it might work out. And the price was something that I arrived at later when it was all done, and they had gotten some media attention, and then people started calling to place orders, or they wanted to buy the canoe that I made with my dad's tools. And I said I couldn't sell that one, it was too sentimental, but I said I'd be happy to make you another one just like it. And yeah, I charge $100,000 for the canoes, and that's if it takes me a year to build, I think that's probably more than fair. um, Most craftsmen might not think of it that way, and I've taken a lot of shit for that, certainly from traditional boat builders. Um, but I think there's like an epidemic in this country of craftsmen who undervalue their work.
A hundred
And
percent, yeah,
like if you spend a year building something, you got to pay yourself,
yeah,
and you have to pay yourself well. And like I had costs associated with it. It's not like I even made that much money off of $100,000 canoe, which other people also laugh at. But like I say these things not to draw attention or create controversy on Instagram, but like they're absolutely 100% true. I see people a lot like, well, I spent all this time working on this beautiful piece of furniture, and oh, I might charge like maybe $1,500 or $2,000. And I'm like, dude,
right,
that's a $17,000 chair that you just made.
right.
But it's, the race to the bottom in America. Like everyone wants everything cheaper and faster. And so here we are
Where,
trying to deal with that.
how did you come to the $100,000 price point?
Well, gosh, that's a funny story. There was a freelance journalist in New York who had heard about my story, and she asked if she could write an article about me for the Wall Street Journal Sunday magazine. This was 2016.
Okay.
And it was a full-page article and a feature story, like opposite Serena Williams in the centerfold, and it was beautiful. They sent a photographer out for a whole day, and the article was mostly about how I'd been inspired to build a canoe after my father died, and then Nick Offerman was kind of part of that inspiration as well. But she finished the article, and this was like before it was going to come out 4th of July weekend in 16. And like a week or so before, the editor called, and she said, all right, the article looks great, the photography's great, but we just need to know one last piece of information, which is how much does the canoe cost? And I was like, well, it's not for sale. This is like my dad's tools. Like I was like, panicked because I said, I don't have a price. And she said, well, you have to have a price because this is the Wall Street Journal and everything is for sale. And our readers will expect that if we're doing a full page article about this beautiful wooden boat, that like they can buy it or something like it. So she gave me an hour, and I hung up the phone. I called my boss. So the owner of my winery, although he passed away last year, sadly, he was the CEO of New Line Cinema for 30 years. So he was executive producer of The Lord of the Rings and Austin Powers, and he was on the board of trustees of the Museum of Modern Art. And he's like a father figure to me. And I called him and I told the whole dilemma. I was like, they want to know what it costs. And he said, well, you'd be a fool to charge anything less than $100,000. Because if you charge, like, say, 20,000, no one will take you seriously. They'll think, wow, what a dipshit. He spent a year building something and he's only charging 20 grand. Like, what is he doing? He said, and in the contemporary art world, people don't flinch at charging $500,000 for like a 2-foot by 2-foot oil painting. Like, pricing in the art world is a completely different animal than in craft. But he said, think of it as a piece of art. So charge at least 100,000, and then people will take it seriously, and you'll probably get orders for them. And he was absolutely correct. So I called her back and I said, it's 100,000. And she said, great, thanks. She hung up the phone. And then the next week, I bought the Wall Street.
Hold on. When you called her back and you said it's $100,000, what was going through your mind at that point?
Oh, I mean, I was like,
this is crazy. I can't believe I'm going to tell this chick this boat's $100,000.
Yeah, kind of. And I tried to sound like all natural and calm. Like, yeah, so I thought about it, and here's the price. It's going to be 100,000 if anyone would like one. And she didn't flinch at all. I mean, she was like, okay, great, thanks. And like hung up.
She erased the 500,000 and rewrote it.
Yeah,
right. She had like a placeholder for $500,000.
Yeah, right. Well, to my horror, then a week later, I went to the newsstand in New York City. I bought a copy of the Wall Street Journal. I open it up, and the headline says the world's first $100,000 canoe. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? It was the headline. It became the story. Not so much that I built the boat with Dad's tools. The story became that there's this guy who's audacious enough to charge 100 grand for a canoe. Oh my God. And I just remember holding the paper, like my hands were shaking, like, what is going on? So that led to a whole cascade of things, because like a week after that, Esquire magazine called and they said, are you the guy that makes the world's most expensive canoes?
This is amazing.
And I was like, I guess I am. I've never sold one at 100,000, but so right. Then about a month after that, Rob Report magazine called. Are you the guy that makes the world's most expensive canoes? And it just was like, and then the New York Times, and it just snowballed. And then people started reading the articles. There's one in the Financial Times of London, and people started calling and just placing orders. And no one even asked about the price, because the price was in the headlines. Like,
right. That's how they found you.
Yeah. So it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And believe me, there were moments when I was like, I felt like a total poseur, that like, I'm saying that I'm the builder of the world's most expensive canoes, but I hadn't sold one at that price yet. So when I finally did, then I was like, okay, now that's a legitimate title.
So let's go back to, this first canoe that got you here. Where was the media coming from? Like, how are people following along with this?
Instagram. It started with Instagram.
Is that when you started Preszler Woodshop?
Yes.
The handle? Yeah,
when I actually, it's in the book too. There's an interesting moment when I went to buy lumber for the first time. I went to a nice fine wood purveyor on Long Island, and when I walked in, they asked me for my corporate name, because they don't really sell to the general public so much. They sell to accounts and builders and contractors in the Hamptons. And I kind of panicked on the site, because I was like, I don't know. I put like Preszler Woodshop on the on the form, but I hadn't yet even started the LLC. And then shortly after that, I started Instagram at Preszler Woodshop, mostly because my mom wanted to see pictures of what I was doing with Dad's tools. So that's kind of how that all started. And I forget the first part of your question now.
There's got to be other people who are building canoes comparable to this, right?
No, I don't think so.
Nobody? Really? You're the only one?
There are probably 5 canoe and kayak builders in North America. But no one does it to the level of luxury and detail that I do. And I say that I think that if any of them were listening, they might not be mad at me for saying that, because I do go completely over the top with my canoes. I have like bronze trim and leather seats and crystal bezel nautical compasses. And my thought with the canoe after the whole $100,000 thing happened, canoes have always been a product of their time and place that they were built. And so over history, they were built practically using materials that were available to people in their time. So whether that was birch bark or canvas on frame, I felt like my time and place was here I am, this wine industry executive living in the Hamptons or the East End of Long Island, and my canoe should be kind of blingy. Like it should be like different. And every canoe historically and every
you can't put rims on a canoe, you know.
you can jack them up and put that like purple under.
You can't tint. Yeah, you can't tint a canoe.
Well, in terms of if there are other people doing it, no one's quite doing it this way, because what I decided early on was I wanted to apply the principles of super yachts to canoes. So throughout history, canoes have always been very utilitarian. Like people expect that they're lightweight and you can drag them through the woods, scuffing up the bottom and then dump them in a lake, and that they're not really meant to be luxurious. They're meant to be just like beat around kinds of things. And I thought, well, what if you turn that on its head, and what if you build a canoe that's not utilitarian at all and not useful at all in the sense that a normal canoe is, but that is rather heavy and full of luxurious trim details and has the same kind of aesthetic as a super yacht. And so that's kind of how I ended up going down that path, and why I think, for many reasons, why the price is justifiable.
If you're the only person doing it, then you can somewhat name your price at that point too, because if there's nothing else, there's no comps on the market, then it's whatever you want. I mean, if there's a market, if somebody's going to pay $1 million for it, then you can sell $1 million canoe. You just have to have the customer.
Yeah, there's an ass for every seat in America, as they say. There are guys building really high quality canoes and kayaks, including one, Nick Schad, who lives in Connecticut, and he's been doing it a very long time. And his boats are gorgeous, and they're his own designs. There's nothing like particularly flashy about them. I think he charges maybe $20,000 or $25,000. But it's not his full-time gig either. He also teaches at the Wooden Boat School in Brooklyn, Maine, and he's a great guy. But for the most part, canoes are built as by hobbyists and people that just want to have one and build it in their garage. There's not like you can just dial up a place and order a wooden canoe. It's not.
Yeah, I would say
really that
there's probably not a massive market of people who want to spend $100,000 and up on a canoe that you're going to build this, pump these things out and sell millions of them on Amazon.
No, not at all. I mean, I've been doing one a year.
Yeah, you could probably book up for your life at this point.
Pretty close. Yeah, I'm an old man. I'm 44. How many more canoes have I got in me? But it's funny. A couple of the canoes that I've sold went to clients where basically the dad in the family had his power yacht or his whatever Hackercraft or Chris Craft, and they got the canoe for their kids.
Have you had any callbacks?
Callbacks like
quality?
What do you mean?
Quality control. This canoe leaks.
Oh no, nothing like that. But I also make everyone sign a contract in the very beginning, so it's like the sale is final, like a piece of art, basically. Right. The deed transfers at the time that the money clears my account, and it's theirs.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, at the price point and the amount of time that goes into it, you're not selling this where somebody's going to look and say, you know what, I was really thinking I was going to spend $75, but we'll do the $100. Like you have people who are just coming to you because this is what they want and they have the funds to do it.
Right. Yeah, I have a new client who's a country music singer in Nashville whose name I can't say, but he has a house on a lake in Tennessee, and he's not even going to use it.
Yeah.
He has a 16-foot wide fireplace, stone mantle, fireplace, chimney, whatever you want to call it. And
I'll be
horizontally.
But honestly, at $100,000, that makes way more sense to me to invest in a piece of artwork that's going to be like artwork in more of a sense than something like I'm going to spend $100,000 on a canoe and we're going to leave it at the lake. The
Right.
kids can take it out and fish out of it. I'd be way more comfortable with that thing hanging above a fireplace.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he said that he wants it to be usable if they ever decided to take it off the wall. So I'm going to build it as though it will be paddled. But I'm going to work with another Instagram woodworker, Frank Strassa Furniture in Texas. He's an amazing, incredible furniture builder. So I'm working with him. He's going to build like a bracket for the wall. So it's going to be mounted horizontally, so 16 feet wide, but straight up, so that like it's
the bottom of it or the inside of it.
You see the bottom of it, yeah. And so we got to build a bracket that they're going to build into the to the fireplace to hold about 100 pounds weight. But yeah, and I've been working on this for probably 3 months now with their designers and their interior. Their architects and their
it's
designers.
a conversation that I have a lot, about the homes that we build and the homes that we want to be building. And one of the oftentimes I compare it to like custom cars or restoring cars. And, and you can restore, let's just use a Camaro, for example. You can restore a Camaro and spend $75,000, $100,000 restoring that Camaro. If you were to ever sell it, there's a likelihood that you're not going to recoup the money. But there's guys out there that are spending $500,000 restoring these Camaros, and there's this threshold where you spend $500,000, you've now got it to a point where people respect how much time has went into that, and they'll spend spend $750,000 to buy that, and I feel like it's this tipping point, and I relate it to for us as a home builder, we want to build homes in the same mindset of this. We want this to be forever. We want this to be considered. You to consider this as an investment forever, not a return on investment. And even if there is a return on investment, we want to build it with the mindset that we're building something so unique or so well thought out that it doesn't become a comp. It's not compared to what is in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's someone walks this property and values everything that's went into it. And I think that.
Well, sure. And the uniqueness is what's key to that, because I think in your line of work too, comps can sometimes be a disservice.
It works against, there's a whole other part of my business that I've been trying to uncan for the last 18 months. And we want to really focus on building a for sale product, a spec, as you would call it, ultra contemporary modern. And every time the biggest thing that is a hurdle for me is the financial backing, where it's because the realtor says no, that you got to actually make that 4,500 square feet, and it's got to have. It's like, no, this isn't comparing. This is not the same thing as what's next door. And I'm close, I'm very, very close with this one particular property that might give me the opportunity to kind of proof of concept. And I'm listening to you talk about this canoe and thinking of the same, I want to name my price, and then I become the guy that does that.
Right. Well, yeah, there are I'm going to give you a couple other examples. And I think in home building, it might seem totally disparate, but there's two that I'm thinking of. One is thoroughbred horse racing, and the other one is wineries. So I've worked in the wine business for 20 years, and wineries often, when they sell, don't have any comps. They're prestige assets, and it's harder to find a buyer who understands that it's worth a certain number when there are no comps anywhere in the neighborhood. But once in a while, someone comes along who doesn't care about comps and just wants this beautiful prestige asset. And for example, here at the winery that I am CEO of, Bedell Cellars, we've listed it for sale since the owner died, and right now it's just under 20 million, and there are no comps anywhere on the East Coast for a vineyard selling for $20 million. In California, yeah. But, and so every time someone comes and the real estate people are like, well, what do we talk to about comps and this and that? People spend $30 million for a house on the ocean in the Hamptons. That's on 1 acre.
People spend $100,000 on canoes.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's like if people start talking about comps with me, my eyes glaze over, because I'm like, we all know that this country, well, the world, but especially this country, has enough wealth, there's enough people, and where we live, you and me, between Boston and New York, that we can find buyers for things that maybe don't care about so much about, well, who did it before and who did it in the neighborhood the same way. And in fact, they'd be more excited that like, oh, well, Nick built this awesome house. It's one of a kind. There's nothing like it, and it's priced accordingly. So I think it's a great goal. It's a way to differentiate yourself.
Is a vineyard the type of thing? I feel as though that would be just somebody, again, who wants that property, wants to own a vineyard, and is not necessarily looking at it from a financial investment. Like, what's the return I'm going to get on selling wine at this point, right?
Correct. Yes, correct.
So, as you said, it's very similar to what you do, what a lot of high-end builders do, what people are doing with cars and everything else, where it's you find somebody who just wants that. They're not buying that vineyard to be able to, make $1 million a year on selling wine. They're buying it because they have the means to do it, and that's a lifestyle that they want. They want to be able to do that. It doesn't necessarily matter if they make $1 off of it or if it costs them money. That's just what they want.
Exactly. The same thing with thoroughbred horses. People that buy thoroughbreds, which are usually well, a lot of them are like Saudi Arabian princes or people, just titans of business. They don't do it because they're like, let's see what, our return will be. I mean, the oats alone, and then the horse breaks its leg, like whatever. They never know. They all lose money, but it's a passion project. And the people that buy your homes, I think, they have the money and they're going to be passionate about it and they want it and they'll get it.
Is there ever, in the consideration, and this is something I battle with, it's so nice to work with people that want to spend, a lot of money and make something really beautiful and really, well thought out. But there's a part of me that also thinks about like, well, what could I do for the greater good? What could I do for the greater, to make a bigger impact on the country or humanity in general? And it's like, can I take what I've learned in these, ultra expensive projects and attribute that back to the quote unquote middle class or the lower class? Is that ever a consideration?
You for the canoes, or
and I stopped myself there because I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go with that. But it just in general, I guess
I think I can.
It's a tough question to ask.
Well, a couple things. I do feel like at some point I would like to make, if I had the bandwidth, it'd be cool to make a line of less expensive canoes that,
I guess,
that weren't so tricked out, and that I could, if I had a bigger space and some employees, maybe we could pump them out and sell them for less. I've also had some visions about doing something with kids, but I haven't gotten quite to nail the idea down yet. But there is an organization in the Bronx that I've been involved with for a few years. It's called Rocking the Boat. And it's in the South Bronx, actually, which is one of the poorest zip codes in America. And they teach kids how to build wooden boats after school. It's the most amazing, incredible organization. And after they all build a boat at the end of the year, then they like row them around the Bronx River for their biology class. And they teach them how to sail in the bay there, kind of over by the Whitestone Bridge. And it's fantastic. I participated in a fundraiser they did a few years ago where they had teams of people rowing boats all the way around the entire island of Manhattan, which was like the hardest thing I've ever done, and I didn't train for it, and I almost died. It was just like we were all cramping up by the end, and we had to be towed by the Coast Guard because we were drifting. We were like drifting out to the Statue of Liberty. It was a disaster. But we made the Today Show, and we raised a lot of money for that organization. But yeah, I've wondered sometimes maybe I'd like to help maybe get some kids involved. There was also an organization that I devoted a whole chapter to in my book called Essex Industries, and they're based in upstate New York in the Adirondacks. They make parts for wooden boats and canoes. They make baskets, canoe seats, canoe rails, canoe paddles, and all the employees at Essex Industries have some type of disability. Either they're differently abled with their body or their mind, or maybe they are recovering addict, or they just had a rough go of life. But I devoted a whole chapter to them in my book because I wanted people to know like that there's organizations like this out there that do really cool stuff and help people that need a leg up. And I bought a lot of the finishing parts to my canoe from them. Like I bought my first seats from them and my first pair of top railings or gunnels and some paddles from them.
I guess that's what I was getting at, is in short, how to give back.
Yeah.
Because, I think, again, we a lot of us, and people that listen, they want to be building really expensive things. They want to be working on high-end projects. And, and there's a lot of people out there that are unapologetically expensive for sometimes no reason. And they take advantage of that and kind of just, that's their main focus always.
Right.
But what it sounds like is that there is this level of giving back and taking what you started as a passion project because of your dad, and you're giving back into different aspects into that industry,
right,
and trying to offer more.
That's a big motivation for why I wrote a book too, because I sensed that I was becoming, I guess I hate the word, but I was becoming famous for being the expensive canoe guy, and
right.
But there was so much more behind the story that I knew that people weren't even aware of. Most people didn't even know that I started because my dad and my sister died, and I was like desperately sad and wanted to do something with myself. And there's even more to the story. I was estranged from my dad for 14 years before he died. He was an evangelical Christian, and I'm gay, and we just did not see eye to eye on anything. And when I came out of the closet, that was it. Like, he never wanted to speak. And
how old were you?
I was about 22 in graduate school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was working on my PhD at Cornell when it all happened, and there was this whole backstory to why I started doing it. And so part of why I wrote the book was to give back, in the sense that I wanted to share a lot of the lessons that I learned from the experience, and hopefully help some other people along the way. I was going to mention, I love that there's dogs in the background.
That's just one.
I thought
For
it was
some reason,
yours.
she never barks, and today she wants to bark.
No, I don't have, my dogs are upstairs. I'm keeping them out of this situation because they would definitely ruin it if they had the opportunity to. But I was going to say, if you read slow, I don't know if you're into audiobooks, but we recorded an audiobook, and it's 9 hours long. You could just put on your headphones.
I can get through
It's
that.
one work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could get through that a lot faster than reading. So, sorry, going back. So you were 22 years old, and your dad kind of, decided to just not talk to you for 14 years. Was that? And I'm not doing the math in my head, but was that bringing you right to his final moments?
Pretty much.
When you guys started talking again?
That was it. Yeah. We, it wasn't that we never ever talked, but things were just cold. It was like a Cold War. I did go like 8 years at one point without seeing him ever. And when we talked, it was like a couple of sentences, maybe. But he certainly never wanted to ask anything about my personal life. And
were your parents married?
Yes, parents were married. Still married. Well, they were married, yeah, and they were married for 40 some years. And about 2 weeks before he died, he called and invited me home for Thanksgiving. And I was kind of like, all right, well, and I hadn't been home to South Dakota in about 8 years at that point. And so I went, and I actually road tripped because I just got this new puppy, and I had a car, and I was like, let me just take a road trip and get on the open road. And but I got there, and I realized as soon as I got there that he was very sick. Because we never really spoke, I didn't know. I knew from like 7 years before that he had colon cancer, but like I never heard anything else about it. It was like, he got some chemo and it's probably fine. But like, you never got much detail out of Dad. Like, he was a really reserved, kind of shut down, stoic cowboy type Vietnam veteran. And so I got home and he was just really sick. And it was clear right away that I had, that this was maybe going to be the last time I could see him. But I was still kind of half in denial about it, even in the moment. But yeah, we had Thanksgiving dinner, and that ended up being the last time we like shared a meal together. He went in the hospital the next day.
So when you agreed to go home, you didn't realize how sick he was?
No. No.
You didn't have like an idea that was the case, or did you just think, hey, he's kind of coming around trying to make some changes?
I was sort of taken aback by it, that the gesture of going home. And I knew he was sick. I didn't quite know the extent of it. And my mom, yeah. And I think my mom later years later, I asked mom about it, and she said, "Oh, we just didn't want you to worry."
Yeah. What was the relationship with your sister like in your, because I feel as though siblings a lot of times in that situation could potentially remain close, and then that would affect, your sister's relationship with your parents.
Yeah. Well, my sister, so I have two sisters. One is much older than me, so she's hasn't been as much of a part of my life. But the sister who died actually was had cerebral palsy. So she was disabled her whole life, and it was kind of a rare form of it that got degeneratively worse. So the first 10 years of her life, she was sort of functioning, and then the last 15 years of her life, she was not. So I think there was like an added layer of trauma with my parents that just between losing their daughter and then me coming out, I think it was kind of just like their heads exploded and they kind of shut down. Which, it's a part of the book is my journey in forgiving them and understanding why and how that all came to be.
Did your mom try and keep things together at all? Or was it like, hey, just I'm not going to intervene at this point?
Yeah, mom was the really the intermediary. A lot of the time, she was kind of the one sort of trying to bring dad and I together. Like even in the hospital, right before I left to come back to New York, and dad was like, "Oh, I left some stuff for you in the garage," and I was like, "Oh, I'll come back and get it at Christmas. I'm going to be back in 2 weeks." And my mom was like, "Honey, go put it in your car right now. Like, don't leave without taking that stuff.
Yeah.
Just listen to me." And I didn't. I was like, "Oh no, I'll come back. I'll get it at Christmas." And but mom was always kind of there, like running undercurrent, trying to bridge that gap between us.
And you said you came out and you were 22.
Yeah.
Did you feel that your mom had an idea of that before you came out?
Maybe, although it's hard to say.
Yeah.
And she's never really said either. Honestly, like, I mean, where I grew up is, I don't know if you've been to South Dakota.
Have not.
No.
Okay.
It's top on my list.
Well, I mean, I didn't see a black person until I went to college.
Yeah.
I didn't meet a gay person until I went to college. Like I grew up on we had 10,000 acres of land, and it was in western South Dakota, and the closest town was about 60 miles away. And there was a study done that said we were the most remote place in the United States because we were 146 miles from the nearest McDonald's. But it was, I went to a one-room schoolhouse with 8 students close to the Standing Rock Sioux Indian Reservation. Like we had like one TV channel. I mean, my upbringing was so isolated that for you to say like, did your mom think you were gay? Like we didn't hear or know what the word gay was.
Yeah.
Like there was this was like the 80s and 90s in the middle of absolute nothing, nowhere.
And when do you think you realized this?
Oh, when I was like probably 7 or 8.
You knew,
Yeah.
and it was just like nothing that you understood. Nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because I think that was where I'm from. That was the generation before mine. My parents and stuff said that growing up, it was more sheltered than that, and they didn't talk about it, and it didn't come out until years later that people started addressing it or understanding it. It was still kind of kept hush at that point. It wasn't like, that's nothing I grew up with. We've always been familiar with that and understood that, but it seems like you guys are kind of a generation behind.
Yeah, I think so. The Midwest, South Dakota, it's like we were not of the same modern America that a lot of others were, I think. And it was in part because of the isolation and in part, I think, because of their religion.
Yeah.
And that taught them that it was an abomination, basically, and something to not ever talk about. So
you left to go to school?
Yes.
Where did you go to school?
Yeah, I went to undergrad at Iowa State University, and then Cornell University for my master's and PhD.
Right.
And I thought at the time that Iowa State was like the biggest city in the world. I'm like,
I'm free.
oh my God, I'm free. Like, there's so many people here. Yeah, it was really freeing, and I had to get out. And that's a big part of, I think, a lot of people have written to me after reading my book, and even people that grew up in New York City who say that, like, I really related to the fact that you wanted to get out of where you were. And I grew up on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and I still wanted to get out and go somewhere else, And that's sort of a big theme in my book is like getting out on the road and making something of yourself.
And when you got to New York, did you stay there?
I did. Yeah, I never left. I just love New York so much. I came in '99 for graduate school. I worked a temp job for a year at Goldman Sachs on Wall Street. Hated it, but it was exciting because I was like in a skyscraper,
right.
Like my office was on the 38th floor, and I was like, they paid for my lunch. It was thrilling. Like, oh my God, there's a salad bar. Like, wow. But yeah, and then I went to grad school at Cornell, and I never left. And I wrote my thesis about wine, about New York wine, and sent a copy to the vineyard owners in New York State, and ended up getting a job at this particular one. Been here ever since.
So you got into wine right out of school?
Yeah. I got in, I always studied botany, and I came into wine from an agricultural perspective. Plant biology. So horticulture, like gardening, plants, farming, that kind of stuff.
And that was that driven from your upbringing in South Dakota? Yeah.
It was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, my the first gift my dad ever gave me, like, that I remember, I think maybe my 7th or 8th birthday, he gave me a coffee can, like an old Folgers coffee can filled with garden seeds. And he had tilled up an acre of land beside the house, because when you have 10,000, like, okay, here's an acre for you. He was like, that's going to be your garden. And the can of garden seeds, they were all jumbled up and mixed up. And it was my job to kind of like plant them and make sense of them and sort the seeds. But the first year, I just took them handfuls of them and threw them out, and had a mess of a garden. But that's kind of what was my first impetus to study farming and plants. And he gave me every year the same gift, a coffee can of seeds. And I learned how to sort them by size and color and shape, and what seeds grow up into different plants. And then I ended up studying grapevines at Cornell for grad school. So, yeah, I never really was that into wine, but I found a professor who had a grant to study wine, and I thought, well, that sounds good.
So no desire to.
No,
you just fell into it.
I fell into it. Yeah, like I had an option to choose 2 thesis projects. One was a study of tulips and the flower trade with the Netherlands, I guess, and the other one was to study wine. And they were just 2 grants that this one professor of agricultural business had available that semester. So I chose wine, and that was it.
So in study, so I'm getting in the weeds here, but that's okay.
That's all right.
In studying wine, what was so interesting about it?
So the most fascinating part about wine, which I can geek out on a little bit with you guys, I think, is that the grape has 400 constituent aroma molecules in its skin, and it possesses the aroma molecules of most other fruits and foods. So, like, for example, if you crush up a bunch of strawberries, they will smell like strawberries. If you crush up a bunch of bananas, they smell like bananas because they have just the banana aroma molecule in them. But grapes have the aroma molecules of strawberries and bananas in them, and blueberries and blackberries and chocolate and whatever. So when you ferment grapes, it releases like all these different aromas, and it's kind of like it's this microcosm of the entire biological world in this magical little thing. So I found it endlessly fascinating. It's just the sort of constituency of all these these molecules like mushed up together with alcohol and water.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So after studying wine, do you have like a greater comprehension of? Can you pick apart a lot of that stuff and kind of pull that out? What are those people called? Sommeliers?
Yeah.
Like that stuff blows my mind, where somebody eats something or drinks something. They're like, yeah, I'm really picking up nutty undertones. And I'm like, yeah, it just tastes like the food to me.
My favorite that I've heard is someone took a sip of it and they were like, you know what? I'm really getting like a wet cardboard taste. And I remember drinking it. I'm like, that's exactly what this tastes like, is wet cardboard. But I wouldn't have picked up on that or like related it. And it's always, part of me like definitely thinks half of it's bullshit. But the other part of me is like when I really listen, it's like some people like to know that there's that many aroma molecules. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
In that, and the fact that there is different, I guess flavors and aromas within that one grape. Now that makes a little bit more sense to me in the sense that, that's why all wine doesn't taste the same.
Well, yes. And I was just Googling to make sure I got the reference right. But the wet cardboard is actually an aroma. It's a specific compound, and it's related to cork taint. So sometimes there's this TCH molecule in corks, and if it somehow spoils the wine after a certain amount of time because it leaves the cork and transmutes into the liquid. I think it's called TCH, but anyway.
The stuff in weed that gets you high?
No, it's THC.
Maybe that is.
THC.
Maybe it's something else. THC. Oh, TCA. Sorry, TCA, which is trichloroanisole.
Okay.
So that's the molecule responsible for wet cardboard and wet newspaper smell. So every smell is just like a little compound, right? So you smelling that meant that wine was technically spoiled. But yeah, I can get all those aromas and things, but in a sense, like I know too much about wine to enjoy it that much anymore, because it's all so reductive to me now. I'm like, oh yeah, that smells like trichloroanisole.
Yeah, we have a friend whose sibling was in like the culinary industry, and I think it's her husband now. They just like happened to realize how he could taste and kind of pick up all of these like differentiations between different wines and grapes and where they come from, but he had no idea. And somehow in school they realized this, and like that's what he does for a living now. But like it was nothing. He wasn't formally trained initially, and they realized this, and now he's like makes a full-time living doing that. And obviously
Incredible.
get trained in it at that point, and I'm sure certified and all that stuff. But like that's something where somebody's born with that more so than somebody learning about that and understanding the biology behind what's making the wine.
And he can pinpoint a moment when they realized that, right?
Yeah, like
right.
it was basically like, okay, let's exploit this now. We realized that, but he had no idea his entire life that he could do that, and he's just like some sort of, like just unique situation where, hey, this is what you have a God-given ability to do this, and so it took like very little polishing to get him at the top of his game.
Wow. So I have this theory about life, and this will relate to Nick and I think your career, and I think the subject of your podcast often is how people work and get sort of move forward in their lives as builders. I have this divining rod theory where if you trace back like your friend to the moment that they realized that they could smell things great, that was a moment that changed their life, the direction of their life. But they probably didn't realize it, and maybe until years later, that was like the why, like the place where everything changed. And like the story I just told you about grad school, I remember the day when I sat down with that professor and was like, all right, what should I do for my thesis? And he said, you can choose tulips or wine. All right, I'll take wine. And now look, like my entire life has gone on that trajectory. And I always encourage people, whether they're developing a business plan or they're figuring out like, what am I passionate about? What do I want to do in life, and where am I going? Like, and before you think about where you're going in the forward direction, look back to where you came in the sort of reverse direction. And I like to find these sort of these moments where I didn't know it then, but looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that was the day that I did XYZ, and that changed the course of my life forever. It's a fun exercise, and I've done it on paper too before, where I draw like evolutionary trees almost. And a recent one was I had an actor named Matt Bomer read the audiobook of my book, and he's won a Golden Globe. He's been in a few movies like, Magic Mike, and he has a show called White Collar and a show called The Sinner on Netflix. And anyway, everyone asks, like, you didn't read the audiobook yourself, but you had this like Hollywood celebrity read it. Like, how on earth did you come to the place in life where you had Matt Bomer read your audiobook? And so I had to do the divining rod exercise, like, oh, well, there was this person, I met this person, and we have a common friend named Steve. And I met Steve at another friend, Genevieve Gorder, who's on HGTV. I met Steve at her wedding in Morocco. And how did I meet Genevieve? Well, I met her because I dated her best friend, John Gidding, who's also on HGTV. Years before that, well, how did I meet John Gidding? Because he saw one of my canoe videos that went viral on Instagram. And how did I start putting canoe videos on Instagram? Because my dad gave me his toolbox.
That's crazy.
And so, like, that's the base reason why I had Matt Bomer read my audiobook, if you really peel back all the layers. I think we can all do that in all aspects of our life.
So if you went the tool-up route, you'd be sorting bulbs and like building vintage motorcycles.
Right, exactly.
Flowers and motorcycles. That's pretty badass.
I think it'd be great. Maybe that's my second career.
It's interesting, and I think you're absolutely right, is that we need to oftentimes reflect on, where we've come from. And, and it's even, I catch myself doing it where, I'm so focused on getting to a point in my life that I think will be the time that I can spend more time at home, or I can take more vacation, or, I just need to build this house and prove that the proof of concept works so I can then change the course of my career. But it's like, well, hold on a second. Like, what about everything that you've done? And I'm speaking to myself, like the last 7 years. Like, look at 7 years ago, it was just me. And now I've built this company, and now I have a team of people that, and we all share this similar mindset. And it's important to reflect. And it's, oftentimes, like, you hear people say, don't look back, keep looking forward. And that is true. Like, you want to keep forward momentum. But I think appreciating how you got to that current moment is important.
100%. And there's always lessons in that history. And my book is structured with flashbacks. So I'll be working on the canoe in real time, cutting wood, gluing things. And then I'm using a tool of Dad's, and I'll have a flashback in the book of the last time I remember Dad using that tool, or a lesson that I learned from Dad that was important for how I could build about it all. And one of those main lessons was little and often makes much. And, there's a lot of cliches like Rome wasn't built in a day and whatever, and don't bite off more than you can chew. But I learned through reflecting on the past, not by imagining what my future could be. Because any future we imagine is actually just made up in our heads. We can manifest it, and we can hope and dream, but it hasn't happened yet. So the lessons haven't been learned yet. But the stuff that has happened to us in the past, we can really dissect, and we can really learn and study ourselves in a way. I did a launch night Zoom with Nick Offerman for my book, and he's such a nice guy. He's so awesome, and he's been so generous at helping me launch my book. And there was a moment when we were split screening to a couple thousand people on Zoom, and I took like a screen capture, because I was just like, what series of decisions happened in my life that ended up with me now here on this Zoom call with Nick Offerman launching my book. Like, it's good to just take stock of like, wow, okay.
I also like in no way diminishing that moment, but I do think that people forget that, we're all human. Like, even Nick Offerman, as crazy as I think, like, I've seen him in, gosh, I forget the play that he was in. He came to Boston.
Well,
if you said it, I would know. But it's he's just a wildly talented person that has went on to become uber successful at what he does. And it's and there my point is that these people are within reach, and they want to
Yeah.
support the next person that is, doing great things such as yourself, and that's likely why, he hopped on board to help support it and split screen with you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's very important to like you said, take inventory of what decisions that you've made, and really just again focused on what mattered to you.
Right. Well, I always talk about my past self taking care of my current self. And there are, not everything I did in my 20s was great. Okay. Like I was kind of a dipshit for a few years, for many years.
That's what your 20s is about, to be honest.
Right. And then I worry about like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I setting myself up for success? Like, should I be doing more? And I think turned out I'm fine right now. So clearly my past self made enough decent decisions to put my current self in an okay place. So I'm learning to trust my current self to make the right decisions to help my future self be all right in this world. And that goes for business development and personal things as well.
So I want to bring this conversation backwards again. So going back to the canoes and getting commissioned, you're in the Wall Street Journal as the guy with the $100,000 canoe, and from that point, you went on to be in Esquire magazine and all of these other magazines. At this point, all of this has just been a buzz around Instagram, right? Because you decided to document, this canoe that you were building. And someone caught wind of it and said,
Right.
"Hey, I want to showcase this." The Wall Street Journal, and then it just kind of spiraled from there.
Right.
At that.
Yes. Until recently.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, no, keep going. I think I shouldn't jump ahead. Tell me
you're
where
talking
you're
about
going.
from the media side of it. I'm talking
from the media side of things.
From there, you are working at this winery. You decide to build that canoe, and then now you get commissioned for. Is this the one that ends up in Switzerland?
That was the first one, yeah. And then there was one in the Hamptons right afterwards.
So I remember
yes,
specifically
that
the
was
one in
first
Switzerland, and I just remember the book is Little and Often, and I thought about that as watching, it was always these micro steps that you took, and which is why it takes 12 months.
Yeah.
But it's like, you talk about, you mentioned earlier that if you understood what went into building a boat, you probably wouldn't have done it. Because it's a daunting task.
Right.
And,
yeah.
and you make a reference to CRISPR.
Totally.
And me and my wife always talk about how we like to get a boat at some point. And I look at Chris Crafts and she's like, "No, all you're going to do is be restoring that thing." And I look at it, I'm like, she's not wrong, but it's just so beautiful. And it's like, and she's like, "I want to actually enjoy it. Like, I want the kids to actually be able to go on it." But to go back, it's, this year-long process of just putting these micro steps together. And I think that right there is what has, in my opinion, why it was so interesting to follow, is because you were seeing what it took piece by piece. And it wasn't this overwhelming, like, "Hey, I got to get the whole side done today." You would, and who knows? I'm watching a 15-second clip on Instagram where everyone's asking where you got your blue boots, but it is, and it's so I caught wind of it, and I would always ask you, I'm like, "Where did you get the blue boots?" But it would be this 15-second clip of you adding like maybe a half a dozen pieces, and my takeaway from that was, no, this is how it's put together. It's not you don't go into this trying to fly through it. This is much different.
Right. Incremental steps are the only way anything extraordinary has ever happened in my life. And building a boat one strip at a time, you put on one strip, you let the glue dry, and you come back the next day, you put on another strip. Sometimes these boats require up to like 80 to 100 strips. So you could be in this for 3 months just laying them down. And then you've got to sand it, and then you've got to put on the fiberglass. And, it's funny, a lot of guys now in this so-called content creation world are making YouTube videos every week and banging out projects because they have to have something that they can show a beginning, middle, and end on a YouTube video. So I'm not knocking those guys. They're all my friends. I get it. but the emphasis is so much
Right.
on the finished product and on like getting something done so you can compress it into a video that will get you clicks on YouTube and make you ad revenue. And boat building could not be more opposite from that. Like, like you said, when people follow me for a long time and then they see me putting down one strip and gluing it, and they follow that for a year, and then they finally see it in the water for the first time, they're like,
Right.
whoa, oh yeah, now I get it. Like this really beautiful thing happened because of all these incremental steps. And I've been fortunate in that my Instagram's gotten quite a bit of following, even without having a lot of finished product to show people. And that lesson, obviously, it's the core of my book. But that whole thing started really with my father when I was a teenager. I had a summer job scraping paint off of a brick barn in South Dakota. And it was like blazing hot, and it was this white barn, and like the paint was peeling, and I had like a wire brush, and it was a part-time job for some old man and whatever. And I was completely daunted, totally overwhelmed, because the whole idea seemed totally impossible that I could ever scrape the paint off this giant barn. And my dad came with me to the job site one day and just said, like, your head's getting in the way because you're overwhelmed. You're just thinking about how am I going to scrape this barn? And he said, but what you really need to worry about is how you're going to scrape this brick. And he took the wire brush out of my hand and he scraped the one brick. And then he gave me the brush back. I get emotional telling this story. He gave me the brush back, and then I scraped the next brick. And we alternated bricks until we had finished like a whole row of the barn. And he said, this is only going to happen brick by brick. And if you try to do it any other way, you're going to fail. And so that's where the title of the book came from, doing things little and often. And eventually you can look back and realize that, wow, I did a big thing. And back then it was high school, and I was scraping, I scraped paint off the bricks, and I had enough money to buy my first car, which is what I drove to college at Iowa State, which
Right.
was like how I got out.
Do you relate that to what you deal with in New York, or just the mentality around New York? Because I feel, everyone is looking for how do I get a bigger brush to scrape 100 bricks at a time?
Yeah. Gosh, I think it's a particular quality of Americans, maybe, that everything has to be bigger, faster, better. And especially in business and in MBA programs, they teach us like, well, how are you going to monetize that? And how are you going to scale that? And people are never satisfied, it seems, with just, what if I don't scale it up? What if I don't monetize it? What if I just have enough for myself? And that is total, for me, that's the definition of sustainability. And I feel like sometimes we're doing this like highline act where we're trying to like find the next big hot thing. And, I've had people venture capitalists come to me with ideas to blow out my canoe business. And, we'll give you all this money and you'll get a brand new building. You'll get 20 employees and we'll build 50 of these canoes a year. And I'm just like, or I could build one a year and have a perfectly fine life and enjoy doing
close
it
to
myself
6
with
figures
my
in the
own
bank
hands.
that I wasn't going to make because I was probably just going to be watching Netflix anyway. You
Right.
know?
That
Yeah.
is, and I think that a lot of that is societal pressure. It's so common. Everyone wants to you're in business to make money and that's it. And you need to find a way to not work to make money or work less to make money, where especially when something's a passion project or you're looking to be able to donate time to certain causes, I think it's so important to maintain the authenticity of what you're doing and why you started it in the first place, rather than kind of go the business route. And I think that while you may not make $1 million a year doing that, you may be happier, and you probably are happier maintaining what you're doing now than kind of chasing that dollar. But
Yeah,
I don't
think
know
so.
if it's access to everybody or everyone putting out on Instagram or social media, that they got a new car, they have this, they have that. or that people just think they need to make millions and millions of dollars a year to be happy, that it doesn't need to be that way. You don't need to have a dozen employees. You don't need to have a new building. You can get by with all that stuff and have a good, happy, comfortable lifestyle, just kind of doing what you're doing and enjoying yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often think about it in these terms of like worrying about my homestead. And I'm not ever going to be the guy that needs planes and 7 houses and yachts. Like, I don't care. To me, it's all just more headaches. And my homestead is taken
For the
care of, so I
record,
can
you
pay my mortgage and
pluralized a
feed
lot
my
of those
dogs.
things. So do you want at least one plane and one yacht?
He's
Well, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes, it's like life sure would be easy with a whole bunch of money, but maybe not.
If you find, for me, you look at what you're doing right now, and if building one canoe a year truly is something that you are enjoying, are you going to enjoy having 20 employees and, that there's a shortage on this material, or this didn't come out the way that I wanted to, or this customer's unhappy, and now something that you find such peace in and joy in, and you make a tiny bit of money on at the end of the day, you took all of that away. And it's for what? So you can buy something else that complicates your life, or you think that you're going to have a little bit more financial freedom, but you just took away something that makes you happy, which at the end of the day, people think that financial freedom is the thing that's going to make them happy.
Yeah. I have another. Yes, I have an example in the wine business too. When I first got into studying grapes and wine, I was super passionate about it. And then the longer you work in a company and the higher up you get, the less and less I dealt with wine. And now basically being CEO, I sign checks and fire people. I mean, like, my job is so far removed from wine and winemaking now. I still love it here, but it's no longer personal and no longer a passion project, because now it's a business, a bigger business. And it's been part of my desire to stick with just doing one canoe a year, is that it's still finally something that I can do by myself, for myself. And I'm happy enough with having all of that, within my control. And it's right where I want it to be. Sorry, go ahead.
What would be, you mentioned that the winery is for sale.
Yeah.
So if it were to sell, what does that look like for you?
Oh gosh, that's the question of the year for me. It's a tough one. I've been pondering that for a while. In some ways, it depends on who the new owner is. If it's a really interesting person who, let's say, owns vineyards in other parts of the world, or if it's a celebrity or something where I could have like a link to the other parts of their life, maybe I would stay on and work for them. But I've built this company myself over the last 20 years. I designed the building. I've hired all the employees, designed the labels. Like, this is essentially my business that I built with the owner's
nice.
Wealth. And so I feel really fortunate. It's been a great run, I have to say. Like, I will never have a better job in the wine business. So this is definitely going to be it for me in the wine business, whether I stay here forever or move on to something else. It'd be nice if maybe there was a new owner and I could be an equity partner for them, since I did build the place. And I know where every body's buried, so to speak. The other avenue that everyone keeps encouraging me is like, well, why don't you build boats and write books full time and just, you won't have a day job. And that's scary to me. I haven't quite wrapped my head around yet how that would work for me. I know I could do it, at least in the short term. I've got another boat commission, and I could come up with another idea for a book probably, but we'll see. Those aren't certain things. My parents' cattle ranch ended up going bankrupt in the early 90s because it didn't rain for 3 years. Basically, there was the farm crisis was precipitated by drought and also by the grain embargo against the Soviet Union, and so I still have that little inkling of doubt in me that, well, what if it doesn't rain for 3 years? Like, what if I don't get a boat commission for 3 years? Then what the hell do I do?
Yeah,
and
but you know, and I say it a lot on this podcast, and I feel like it's fitting. We're talking about kind of stemming from your dad. My dad, I always say he gave me the best and worst piece of advice anytime I thought of something like that. It's like, what,
Yeah.
you know, and when I started my own company, I'm like, what if I don't have any work? You know, you'll figure it out.
Right.
And it's like, I remember, you know, we just bought a house and we just got married, and I found out my wife's pregnant. I'm like, Dad, I don't have any work. I'm renovating that. Yeah, you'll figure it out.
Wow.
And
he's right.
And he is. And to think, you know, to think now back to then, like, I was so frustrated with him. I'm like,
Sure.
you're not. I'm calling you because I need help. I'm calling you where you're going to tell me, like, no, if you do this, you'll be okay. And now, you know, fast forward, it's like, no, I mean, whether he was just getting the easy answer out and kind of just, you know, so I leave him alone or what, it worked. And, you know, and
Right.
I would pass that same advice along to you. It's like, I think about, you know, from what I know of you, you know, obviously the winery being your full-time business, the canoes, I think you've approached this in a way where you've built a brand around yourself more than just what you do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do Shisugiban fences for a living.
It's true. I could just run down to the Hamptons with a flamethrower.
You'd be the only guy in the Hamptons with a flamethrower, using it for non-recreational purposes.
Yeah, totally. It's not a bad idea, actually. I'll have a bucket of tung oil in my left hand and a flamethrower in my right hand and just burn fences. You're right. I'll figure it out. I'm sure necessity is the mother of invention, and I've been through, you know, obviously more difficult times before, and I figured it out. So, yeah, I'm.
Did we talk about? You kind of, I feel like you just kind of glazed over the fact that you built the wine business with the owner's wealth. I guess
Yes.
I had originally thought that this was his company and that you came into it.
So he bought an existing vineyard in 2000 that had been founded in 1980 by another person.
Mm-hmm.
And when he bought it, it was kind of in disrepair and was not like a modern, you know, world-class kind of winery. And so he brought me in after grad school at Cornell to run it and rebuild it. And we renovated everything. We have 10,000 square foot winemaking facility now. We have the largest wedding and events venue on Eastern Long Island. We did a lot of construction projects, and then we hired the best people, and all of that takes money. And his interest was primarily in just making the best wine possible that we could on the East Coast. And he kind of turned me loose with a great team of people and his bank account to make it perfect. Like, he just wanted a beautiful, beautiful winery.
And that was it. There was no, and obviously we're summarizing here, but everything was revolved around making the best wine. It
Yes.
wasn't, hey, you
always
have,
about
you
quality.
How long did it take before you guys started making money? Assuming you're now making money, being that it's selling for $20 million.
I don't know how much I can reveal publicly, but the wine business is not necessarily one where anyone gets into it interested in or expecting to make boatloads of cash.
Yeah.
It's a huge game of asset accumulation. You know, we've got 100 acres of land that are highly valuable because the vineyards are top notch. And the brand is very strong, and we sell a lot of our wines to New York City restaurants. So often wineries are generational prospects in France and Spain and places where wineries have been around forever. They take generations to make money. It took us about 20 years, and we just started making money basically in the pandemic is when things kind of turned around for us. You were
building equity the entire time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Major equity. Yeah, and Nick, you were saying something right just a second ago, and I wanted to pick up on that, but now I'm blanking on what that was.
I was just thinking about how sweet it would be to work for somebody where they're like, you know what, I don't really care if you're turning a profit on this, just make it really cool.
Yeah.
And this is going to be your career, and here's my checkbook.
But I think this is like you know, I would want to say this is like the center of this whole conversation is that, you know, the canoe was the same thing. It's like you're gonna put an enormous amount of time and effort into it. You're gonna use these crystal compasses, stuff, because you want to build the best. And it's, that's something that, going back to what I was talking about with homes, it's, I don't want to build this spec to make money. I want to build this spec to fulfill a passion of mine, and
but you have to find the right person there, and it has to be somebody who is passionate,
1,000%,
or has that drive. Because if there's not this, like if I took my business, right, and if I had complete financial security, where there weren't fear of not making money, fear of not being successful, where, it's like, hey, we can't afford life, or we have to sell our house, we have to claim bankruptcy. I think that so much that's a driving factor, that if I didn't have any of that, or I was absolved of all my financial, basically any responsibilities that I have, would you be as driven to be successful if that weren't there? So it definitely takes a special person to not have that scarcity, that fear, that anxiety, and still become very successful or create something. Yeah.
I mean, because you're absolutely right, where it's, there's having someone that is passionate about doing the very best, and having someone be able to actually financially fund that, and then pairing them together, that's a win-win, where oftentimes, at least from the stories I hear, it's someone that does have the financial resources partnering with someone that doesn't give a shit.
Yes, yeah. That's a more common story.
And that's incredibly frustrating, where it's like, well, if he just met me and I could give him my story, and not, it just, I think that's what I'm getting at, is like the center of this whole conversation is about, no matter what the circumstances, you're approaching it with the end result in mind, being the very best product. And I think,
absolutely.
The way you kind of answered Tyler's question about profitability, I feel, and maybe I'm uncovering something here, is that you answered it in the way of, well, the wine wasn't something that you get into for, necessarily the profit, but you talked about having an event space. Is that really kind of a separate business? Because
no, it's part of this one, and I would say that quality has been our only motivator for the last 20 years, and every decision we make is about making the best wine we can and protecting our brand. So we don't do things that will kind of sully our brand or put us in association with lesser quality wines, or in accounts that, like dive bars don't serve our wine, right? And a lot of that's driven by price. So you have to price your wines or your canoes or your homes at a level that you attract the type of buyer that you want to attract. But for me, having the owner's kind of financial backing was liberating, because I had always wanted to sort of, how do I say this? I'm motivated by the opportunity to make things crazy good. I'm not motivated by volume or quantity or churning things out, like making the donuts. I have no interest in that at all. I mean, I grew up on a huge ranch where my dad was like planting oats and wheat and alfalfa, and we had like 5,000 head of cattle, and it was like, it's like the phrase in farming is, it's like feeding straw to a horse. Because straw has like no nutritional value whatsoever. And you could feed a horse a whole bale of straw a day and it could starve to death, because it's just like hollow and meaningless. And I'm just not interested in that way of life or business at all. So when we built the winery, built it back up, and we finally got the wines to a quality level where we wanted them to be, I also realized that we did need more cash flow. And we didn't really have a space to do, we had a small tasting room, but we didn't have a space for people to do grand scale events. So we built a 4,000 square foot covered pavilion, and it's absolutely gorgeous. We charge $25,000 for weddings, and that doesn't include anything. It's just the site fee alone. And we're sold out. I mean, we're booked out through 2022. We have like 38 weddings this summer. And it allows us to showcase our wines, and it's also about quality. I mean, you should see all of our weddings are like in Martha Stewart magazine, and like these are just over the top gorgeous weddings. And
people don't realize how
Yeah.
difficult it is to make money just by having the mentality of we're going to settle for nothing.
Right.
Like when your primary focus is quality, it costs so much money and it takes so much time to do that you're not going to make money in the first 2 years. You're not going to make money in the first 5 years, 10. It's going to take so long when you truly will settle for nothing but your best. You're not going to make a lot of money. It's going to take, and eventually you will, but it's going to take so long. There's so many easier ways, like mediocrity, to make money. It's so hard to make money when you're like, I want this to be the best, because that 90, you got to 95%, right? And when most people say that's good enough, that extra 5% takes just as long as it took to get from 0 to 95. And that's where all the money goes.
Yeah.
That's where all the time goes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. And I feel like I'm in a really fortunate position in life to be able to do that. Like I don't want to sort of treat it like flippantly, like, oh yeah, we could focus on quality because the owner was a really rich movie producer. Like, I know that to some people that might sound, I don't know what even the word is, but annoying. But, you know, opportunity meets passion and preparedness, right? So like I was put in this position to do it and worked with a guy who had the resources, and I could make it happen. And you know, maybe someone else is in a position where they can't do that and they have to make money and can't always do the best quality.
But I think you know, I think that there's this conversation can be related to so much. And, you know, we talk about social media, and you mentioned how some of these makers are, you know, driven by the fact that they have to have this beginning, middle, and end. And you think about HGTV, where it's like, if the show doesn't show the end reveal, then what's the point of the show? And, you know, and it's, you know, and obviously, you know, we film everything we do, and we did this long series video where it was right before the pandemic, and we weren't, it was just a vanity. It was like this pilot we were going to do about how to build a vanity start to finish. And we couldn't install the vanity because the job got shut down. And we were like, you know what?
Let's
just, you know, whatever. We'll put the video up and we'll see how it does. And then everyone was like, I mean, the video was great, except the fact that we never saw it done. And, you know, and you're touching on something here today is that, you know, that's the way we're trained to think about these things, is that you need to move quick through them and deliver a final product. And it's, you know, almost the hurry up, finish it, we'll fix it later mentality, where the quite the opposite is, you know, and like Tyler said, it's incredibly expensive to do it this way, but it's so much more fulfilling to approach something with, no, I'm going, you know, at any cost, we're going to put out the very, very best.
Right. I think that's an interesting example you gave, because I don't know if it's a particularly American trait or what, but we are afflicted with a burden of expectation on the outcome of everything. Like, oh, you might have had a great process video for making that vanity, but just because like you didn't install it at the end, like it sucked all of a sudden and people didn't like it, or that's what everyone takes away from it.
The US is, you know,
like
it's so fast paced, and everything is, you know, how fast can something be done? You know, I think about how, you know, Europe shuts down for all of August. It's like, you know, and that's just normal. And over here, it's like you ask for a week off, and your boss is like, "Are you shitting me?" It's like, this is the busiest time. You know, it's summertime, and you know, I even think about Doug, who does all our videos in house. You know, I've talked to him. I'm like, I'm so sick of watching. You know, going back to videos where it's quick cuts, just everything is like snap, 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 real fast music. I'm like, slow the fuck down. And I'm watching a video from you know, Europe or Australia, where it's like, no, it's slow, it's sexy, it's methodical. It's like, hey, I want you to appreciate this. Here it is for a couple seconds.
Right. Yeah. the quick cut stuff, it's like the HGTV,
Yes.
and I almost think I'm gonna have a seizure sometimes. They're like, oh my God, and then we redid this bathroom and the screen flashes, and then we put in a new mirror and the screen flashes, and I'm just like, literally it's like watching
Right.
like a mirror ball at a disco because I can't focus on any one thing. It drives me
Like,
bonkers.
slow down. I want to see how you put the mirror in.
Yeah. They do the same thing on the Food Network with all these competition reality show cooking shows where they're like, now I'm going to mix in the eggs. And it's just like the camera, it's all manic. And I think it's a representation of our culture. But I will tell you, there's only like one or maybe two cooking shows that I watch. I'm not big into watching home shows, but there's two slow cooking shows like that Lydia's Kitchen and then that one with Ina Garten. And there's no camera cuts. And it's just like, if she's going to beat an egg, they will show you like a minute of her beating an egg. And you're just like, oh my God, this is so zen.
Right.
I love this. And the sound is all like, what's that sound? ASMR when stuff sound. Yeah, it's just like puts me like in a zombie trance. So I've tried to do some of that with some of my canoe videos, like my glue ups. I'll have no background music, and I will just show me putting on one strip with a bead of glue,
Right.
and I'll clamp it, and that's
Right.
it. And the glue drips down, and then the video ends.
But it should be about the process, and that for me, it's not necessarily about the end result. I think that the end result is what you stumble upon it, and it's almost it's a given, because if your process is that thorough and that in depth, the end result is going to be nothing short of all of those things. Where you kind of have that synergistic result because of that. But for me, that's the entire content generation, everything else. If you were creating your content or your project based around what people are going to click on and what people are going to like, it takes all of that authenticity out of it for me. At that point, I don't care what it is. I don't care what the end result is. I don't care what your steps in getting there are. You're creating content and cultivating content basically to hit as many people as possible. And for me, that's the exact opposite of what I want to be doing, and what I want to see and what I want to kind of take in and I guess kind of
like where you
have what I want to immerse myself in daily life.
Right.
And it's very apparent when people are creating content basically for somebody to like, or to get as many views as possible. And it takes the art out of it. It takes the process out of it, and it's nothing that I really enjoy.
Right. Yeah. And Instagram and YouTube algorithms have driven us to this place. All the lemmings at the edge of the cliff where, some of my favorite videos are the ones that got like no views at all, basically.
Yeah.
And I know precisely how I could make a video that's going to get 500,000 views. Like, it's got to have a zippy camera transition in the first 3 seconds so that the person stays on the screen for at least 3 seconds. And then, I could go down the whole list. And once in a while, I'll do one of those videos and I'm just like, okay.
It's like it doesn't feel as good. And that's, it's funny. Doug and I, we talk all the time about the way we produce content, and we find ourselves slipping in and out of, man, we're just not getting any traction on YouTube, to what, who cares? Let's just keep doing it.
Right.
But it's addicting in a really poor, like, unhealthy way. And
it is. And
Doug and I had a conversation last week, and he's like, I really want to focus on the more theatrical stuff. I've been so focused on creating 3 pieces of content a week for YouTube, where it's like he doesn't want to plateau. And he wasn't even done with the sentence, like talking about it. I'm like, yes. I mean, we have obviously slipped into that mind game of like, how do we beat the algorithm? How do we get more content? How do we get more eyeballs? Where it's like, at the end of the day, I don't need 100,000 people calling me for to build a house.
Right.
I need like a couple hundred in my lifetime.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a little like a Vegas slot machine, the Instagram, the algorithm. Like you just like, well, one more pull. Oh, maybe I'll hit it next time. Let me just pull it one more time. I didn't quite. Oh, it was two sevens that time. But going back to the subject of quality, I mean, this is exactly what you guys are doing. Now you've established enough of a business with your home building that you can maybe take a step back with your content creation and say, well, we're not like desperate for the money and attention. So now let's be better. Let's make better quality content or slow it down and have it be more kind of sumptuous and not as manic. I think that's a great evolution.
It's interesting to me also how people want to see the same crap. Like it has to fit a certain format, a certain timeline. It has to look a certain way. It has to start and end. Nobody wants to see anything unique anymore.
Right.
And for me, I cruise Instagram. I'm like, all right, it's the same shit over and over, chewed up and then regurgitated out with somebody else's name on it. And I'm like, at what point is it going to be something new? But that's what everyone wants, and it blows my mind.
But even us, I mean, I speak for myself, where it's like I find myself stopping on the catchy stuff, and I watch the video. I'm like, I hate this. I hate the fact I watched 17 other people do this exact same thing. And for whatever reason, I needed to see how this person did it. And it's funny, Trent, you're talking about like cooking shows. There's, TikTok is like an absolute waste of time. And like, it's so bad. Like my wife and I, we subconsciously like put the kids down together to bed, sit down on the couch, thinking we're gonna watch TV, and then next thing we know, we're like an hour deep on sharing TikToks. But there's this one guy
terrible.
that he's like I think he does whiskey or something. He takes a glass of whiskey, drinks it, slams it on the counter, and then he cooks. And he goes through it, and it's like this loop. So at the end of the video, like he basically picks up the cup, and it's like, so you never know when the video stops, but it just replays. My point is, is when you're talking about that cooking show, I'm like, I watch it and I'm like salivating, like this food is so good. But I can't. I'm like, there's no way I can even figure out how to cook this because I can't keep up with what he's doing. I'm like, I keep saving them, thinking like I'll go back and I'll like pick and like I'll pause it. You know, I didn't even think he probably puts the instructions in the words below.
Maybe he does, but he doesn't care either. I'm sure he's just getting clicks
and it's
like
and I'm watching. He made like pork bites yesterday. I'm like, I've never even had those, but those look delicious. I'm like,
TikTok is a bottomless pit of the human condition. It's astonishing.
I've never been on it.
It's terrible.
Oh my God.
It's so it's
maybe
terrible.
don't.
I don't think I will.
I mean, it's borderline porn too. It's strange, like all the dancing stuff.
I mean, we talked.
I mean, not
See,
porn,
that was
but...
the one draw for me.
we had a couple weeks ago another guest that he talked a lot about basically a downfall he had within himself with TikTok because of like you're without even getting without even selecting it, you're just completely enamored by these chicks dancing and and just like you said, borderline porn. It's like this isn't what I need to be casually scrolling by when my daughter is watching Blippi on the TV next to me. It's like
I often think of these social media platforms like I think about what I want to get out of each of them. So I go to Instagram and I've whittled down the people that I follow to basically people who I've met in person, who I know, or who I have an interest in their work or their human or them as a human. I go to YouTube when I want to know how to do something. And I go to TikTok if it's 3 a.m. and I can't sleep. And I'm just like, let's see how inane the human species can be. And I go to TikTok.
Next thing you know, it's 5:30. It's like,
yourself.
I didn't need to sleep.
Yeah.
Screw it.
Exactly. Like, I better just start my day because it's 5 o'clock. And I go to Facebook to find out like what my great aunt is doing in South Dakota. Like, because that's the only people that still use Facebook.
Right. And it's, it's the same, like Instagram, I find that's where my inspiration, I'm able to kind of categorize my inspiration where it's, other builders, architecture, like you said, do I value someone as a human being? Like, though that it's a great place for that. And obviously, I mean, the three of us, unfortunately, John's not on this right now, but, the four of us, it's like we've built, we've shaped our career over the last 5+ years using Instagram. You made it to the to the
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal, shortly into it.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's super powerful, but again, kind of going back to the central focus here is that, it's never wavered from, I'm sure it has wavered in times, but it's like we try not to waver from putting out, 100% effort towards the quality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I am very grateful for Instagram. I will never be cynical about it. I've gained so many wonderful friends through Instagram, and I never in a million years would have known or met other canoe builders, boat builders, woodworkers, builders like yourself. What other way would I even know that
Right.
you exist? Like, I mean,
Boat builders aren't big on TikTok.
no, they're not. They're not like dancing and like gray sweatpants on a deck of a boat. Like, I mean, it's been really, I don't know, it's been so fantastic. I've met probably 25 woodworker types from Instagram in real life later, including 2 just last week. I met Keith
Yep.
of KJ Sawdust and Jason
Yep.
from Bourbon Moth. And I was on their podcast when my book came out. And I've been friends with them, like you, I've been friends with them for probably 3 or 4 or 5 years. And when we met in person, it was like just picking up an old conversation among friends. Like it didn't feel like awkward that like I'm meeting you in person now for the first
funny
time.
that
It felt like,
to me, it's funny that we're still having the conversation around, hey, this isn't awkward.
yeah,
And, because it
Yeah.
has. It's been, Tyler, John, and my life for the last 4 or 5 years, especially with the podcast and going to events and seeing people. Like, it's almost like we're never introducing each other.
yeah,
But just last week, it's,
Right.
and Tyler, you asked me right before we hopped on, it's like we went away with a couple friends. There was 38 people that we went on the glamping trip with. And we only knew 2 people.
Wow.
And we were there like, oh, how do
Uh-huh.
you know Matt? And I was like, well, Instagram. And they're like, oh, that's weird. I'm like, no, I
Right.
think we're beyond that. Like, I think that it's pretty normal now. It's like, because I feel like if I asked you how
Yeah,
you met your husband,
it
you
is.
tell me it was Tinder or Bumble. It's like we're beyond this at this
Yeah.
point. But it's funny where it's like
Right.
it's still this like thing that we dance around.
Yeah, it is funny. Maybe it's our generation. Like the kids probably younger than us are like,
Yeah, it's very normal.
it's totally normal for them. I think we're probably all in our 40s, I would say, or late 30s somewhere. 30s or let's just, I'm not even going to.
30s.
30s and
Okay.
40s. Let's put it there.
Okay. So like, we're the last generation that grew up analog and became adults digital. Like we remember the invention of email, right? Like I remember the day I sent my first email, and like I was still using a typewriter. My first job out of college, I was a White House intern in the same class as Monica Lewinsky at the White House. And we had to type everything on like word processors, like part of my job was researching speeches and we couldn't Google anything. You had to like get in a taxi and go to the Library of Congress and pull out a card catalog and, do research on stuff. And so I think we're still a little bit, we've got the ghosts of the analog past within us somehow, where maybe it's still weird. Like,
Right.
oh, I met you in real life. Oh,
Because before social media, it was the message boards and forums.
I think
Yeah,
that that's safe to say though that we are the in that generation of people that had both, and it still is. I mean, even internet dating and stuff. I think that we're right on that cusp. I'm 35, and right on that cusp of when people started meeting. Like my brother met his wife online, and it was like a little bit weird at that point. He's 3
Yeah.
years older than me, but now it's super normal. Most people end up meeting online. My younger brother, who's 32, is single, and that's how he meets everyone, is online at this point. And we've kind of done that. And we did have pre-internet. We did have even I don't know why I was thinking about it laying in bed the other night, how I used to go to the library in town and how they used to, like, there was the card catalog still there, and they used to check you out and like stamp your book for when you had to return it. And then in high school, everything was digital. They scanned it like a UPC at the grocery store. There were like alarms that you couldn't walk out without the book. but we did have both of that stuff, both
Right.
of those things, and it's interesting to see. I think, I don't know, that's probably why I have such little patience for a lot of the stuff today. I think I'm an old man at heart, and I'm like, that's not how you make a living, that's not how you do things, and hard work and this and that, and it's a way of life for a lot of people now.
It is. It really is. I mean, it allows us to be so much more specific about our intentions too, to be online, the types of people we want to interact with, or the types of work we want to see on Instagram. Like, it's no longer just sort of a card catalog crapshoot. You can be like, no, I'm very interested in how people make handmade rolling pins. Okay, like that's a thing, and I'm going to go really deep on rolling pins today and figure that out. I went to a bar for the first time last weekend. Let's see, first time in maybe a year and a half. Okay. And I was in Provincetown up on Cape Cod, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get back in the saddle. It's been like 18 months. The gay bars are back open. I'm going to go. And I walk in, and, there's like a smattering of 20 or 30 people. And I'm like, this is so random. How do you expect that you just hope you walk in a room somewhere and there's going to be the love of your life standing across the bar? I'm like, this is why the apps are great, because you can be like, at least you know something about the person. In a bar, you're not going to walk up to someone and be like, okay, tell me your age and where you went to college and what your 5 favorite things to do are.
Yeah, you can already be like 6 dates in, I would imagine, by the time you meet somebody with online. So my wife and I used to go. We still go once a year. We usually end up going to the Cape, but we met in college, and we went to Drexel, so our terms ended in the fall. So we would end up, like, our summer break was actually 2 weeks, like at the end of summer. It was basically mid-September. So we would go up and we spend a week up on the Cape. And the first time we went, I'd grown up going with my family, and we had a house up there, and we would go in the summer and like clean the house up and do maintenance and all that stuff. But I remember going into Provincetown and there being like these, I mean, it was insanity. Like overly flamboyant parades and drag queens, and just it was so funny. And I was telling my wife about this and how crazy it was, and we ended up going up in September, and it was just busloads of old people trying to get like the Cuffy sweatshirts on sale. And she's like, yeah, this is really crazy, Tyler. And I was like, yeah, this is not what it's like in the middle of summer.
Well, it has changed a lot. And, this is kind of a quality of the gay world, the gay life in America, is often we were pushed to the outskirts. And so we had to kind of colonize these less than ideal places.
I was going to say, I wouldn't consider, I feel like Provincetown is not a less than ideal, besides the fact that it's all the way at the tip of Massachusetts. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was all the way at the tip. I mean, P-Town and Fire Island in New York is the same version of P-Town, and they are isolated for a reason, because you could be arrested and beaten up by the cops for being gay in the 60s and 70s. And so they went to the places that were really remote because they could kind of be crazy and do their own thing and not be bothered. But eventually they made it cool, so people like Tyler go see it, and they're like, this is fun, this is great. I was in P-Town last weekend. I'm telling you, it was filled with bachelorette parties. Yeah, and there was a cruise ship pulled into the dock, and so a cruise ship now comes to P-Town. And I didn't even know the harbor was deep enough to have a cruise ship there.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. It was like these hordes of basically a bunch of straight white people from Canada just piling out of the cruise ship. And I was like, oh my God, P-Town is not the same.
No,
not the same.
We haven't been up. I mean, going up as a kid, at this point, 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years ago, 25 years ago at this point. But then even going up now, it is a lot different. And especially off season, it was, like I said, it was basically old people taking bus tours, like getting mugs that say Provincetown because they're 35% off, and like buying all the sweatshirts
And the fudge and everything.
Yeah.
This is another drawback of assimilation too, because as gay people have become more accepted, there's been less need for us to go places to be safe together. So, P-Town and Fire Island are still vibrant as gay communities, but not as much, and they're aging. And I think younger guys and girls, younger people in the LGBT community are,
Right.
maybe they can live in some suburban town and they don't need to go to these sort of
I
isolated
would
spots.
I would agree with you in the sense that, like, obviously, like, there's been a massive shift in acceptance. But what I struggle to see is in the professional world, and
Yeah.
you speak on it more than me. Like, what does that look like from your your career, whether it's wine or woodworking? Like, I feel like in the personal life, there's been this massive move towards acceptance, but in the professional world, it hasn't, and that's sad. Like, that's frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, I have a couple personal experiences with this, but I think I have to also check my privilege
Right.
here because I'm still a white guy. So to most people, I just look like a white dude, right? And they may not even know I'm gay. And this surfaced in a chapter of my book when I went to the lumberyard for the first time to buy wood to make my canoe. And I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never used a power tool. I had never used a saw. Like, I had literally no experience. And yet I walked into this place bustling with contractors. And because I was wearing like a blue shirt and drove a BMW and I'm a white dude, I waltzed in there and the owner showed me around and helped me buy lumber. And it was like a pleasant experience. And the whole time I was like on the inside, I was kind of like worried about being exposed and discovered as being a complete amateur and novice. But I think on the outside, people were just like, oh, it's like, whatever,
affluent.
a dude in a
Right.
BMW, let's sell him some wood, right? And so I never thought anything about that chapter until there's a woodworker named Laura Mays on Instagram. She's a professor and chair of the Krenoff School of Fine Woodworking at Mendocino College in California. She's an incredible woodworker. She's queer. She is always helping us think critically about, I think, sort of the queering of the woodworking space. And she and I are going to be on a panel next week at the Center for Art in Wood in Philadelphia talking about this very topic, woodworking, wood artists, and just how, when, and why gay people have been able to exist in that world. But anyway, she read my book and she posted a really beautiful review of my book on Instagram, like a really generous, thoughtful post. But then she also said she was shocked at that chapter where I went to buy lumber, because she said she could come up with dozens of examples of her friends who are women or non-gender conforming friends that would go into lumber yards and be completely
Mistreated,
just sort of ignored or not taken seriously. I mean, she's the chair of a woodworking department. She makes some of the finest furniture in the country, and she goes into lumber yards to buy lumber, and dudes are so condescending to her and just say awful things. And so she helped me understand that even though I'm a gay man and I might think that that's a handicap in some ways, I'm also still a white dude. And there's a normalization there that I just want to call out. So I haven't faced a whole lot of discrimination in the workplace. In fact, I think it's helped my career in some ways. The wine business tends to be a little bit glamorous. And I think that sometimes there's a lot of people in that world that I can kind of rub elbows with, and it works out fine for me. So it hasn't been devastating. But the woodworking stuff is a whole different ball of wax. I have been called every name in the book on Instagram. And I save them sometimes, like I do screen captures of the complete lunacy that happens on my page. Like last week I posted, my book was named one of the best books of the year by USA Today. And like, it was this gay pride article, like, here's this guy who builds boats with his dad's tools and whatever. And I got probably 20 or 30 like shocking comments that you can't even believe people still
Right.
say these things in modern society. Um, and I was just blown away, and I'm constantly reminded that the reason we have things like Gay Pride
Right.
is because we still need them, because there's still so much hate and division out there. And just, I mean, I had people throwing Bible passages at me. I had people calling me a fag, and like, fag shouldn't be in
Lunacy. Like
woodworking. I mean,
absolute
just
lunacy.
you
Yeah.
can't even. It's a, yeah. And I'm like, I consider myself a pretty successful, and I would say like mainstream-ish guy. It's not like I posted a picture of myself in like a red sequin speedo.
It wasn't
Okay.
a thirst trap. It was,
I posted.
it was a genuine.
It
Yeah.
wasn't a thirst. Yeah, exactly. There was no thirst trapping. I was just saying my book is being critically acclaimed, and they just wanted to cut me down. So anyway, that's my only personal experience with it.
So I have issues with people who, like, you're an asshole, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, whether you're black, white, it doesn't matter. Like, it's more personality based. Like, if somebody annoys me because they're overly gay, they'd annoy, like, the same type of person who's overly straight would annoy me. It's just like,
Right.
a little bit more reserved, a little bit more in moderation. And that's what blows my mind, that people, like, to like somebody or not like somebody based on a personality trait, sure. How they treat you, sure. But because of their, sexual preference, or because of the color of their skin, it blows my mind that people still do that. And it also blows my mind that, like, after the first generation of people where you had kids and then your kid was gay, like, how are you not accepting of everyone at that point? Like, once you have a generation with
Right.
children, I feel like everything that's different with people, everything that, whether they're special needs, whether somebody has one arm, whether they're like, after that
Yeah.
first generation, you should be so accepting of everyone, because it's like, it's my child. No matter what, I love them.
Right.
And the fact that we're this far along of people procreating and having kids and, being out and about and around more and more people, that there's still some people that are so sheltered to say shit like that, or to feel that,
Yeah.
is just, it's insanity.
I feel sometimes lucky that I'm not on YouTube, because I think the comments I've gotten on Instagram are
Yeah.
mild compared to the shit I've seen on YouTube is
Yeah.
wow. It's like barn burner type.
Completely unfiltered. Like,
Yeah.
to be frank, like, it's embarrassing. When I read it, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm embarrassed for you.
Yeah.
And that.
You're like, who are
How
these
do you
people?
have that much time? That's like another thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, what sort of person are you that you had that much time to write that long of a response about a stranger that you know nothing about?
Yeah. And a lot of it's driven by, I think, this sense of other. So, like, you shouldn't be doing that because you don't fit the stereotype of what I think a person like you should be doing. I have a good friend, Anne of All Trades is her handle on Instagram, Anne Briggs. She's amazing. She's one of my closest friends. And she's building a wood school. She has a farm. She raises animals. She makes her own yogurt. Like, she is a constant whirling dervish of energy and of content on YouTube. She's always building stuff. She posts videos on YouTube doing any sort of woodworking stuff. And I mean, it's shocking. These guys are like, get back in the kitchen.
Right.
Crazy.
Like, I mean, just dozens of comments that are just, oh my God, are they serious? Did you really just write that? And she sometimes will screen grab them and then like post them on Instagram. Like, look at all these fine followers that I have. So I think actually women have it worse than gay guys in our realm in building, in construction, in woodworking. I think, because like I said, I still pass off for most people as just like some random white dude. And I have my other good friend, April Wilkerson down in Texas, another person I respect tremendously, and she works harder than anybody. I mean, she's posting like 100 stories a day and 2 videos a week, and it's mind-blowing. But she also works in the hot Texas sun and will wear a t-shirt, and she's a woman. and she's beautiful. And you read the comments on her YouTube page, it will peel the paint
Right.
off walls. It's shocking what dudes will say about her body and about her being in woodworking. I only highlight this because I think sometimes when we don't highlight it and we just say, like, we keep everything general, we don't really know how
Right.
bad it is. But you turn your face to the fire and you look at the really nasty shit that goes on social media, and it truly is mind-blowing. We have a long ways to go in this country.
It's in I wanted to make a big effort not to make this about like my account, but I had switched our logo to in support of Pride.
Yes,
And
thank
a
you. I
ton of
saw
people,
that.
a ton of people reached out, and I have a lot of loved ones. My brother's gay, but I think love is love. I support all of that, but I think what you just said is really important to note, because I was actually talking to John and Tyler offline. I'm like, this is crazy. Like the amount of hate messages I'm getting for supporting this.
Wow.
And, and like I think you may have posted something like it was my biggest unfollow.
I lost 1,000 followers.
So I was like,
week.
I never look. So I was like, I'm going to
Yeah.
look at mine. And it was like this massive decline.
Wow.
And I was talking to my wife about it, and she's like, you know what? Fuck them. Like,
Yeah.
who cares? And and part of me, yeah, I agree with that. But the other part of me is like, but that doesn't help.
Yes. I know what
it's
you're
like,
saying. Yeah.
like I want to, I almost want to hear what they have to say. If they can have like a legitimate conversation with me, I want to hear them out.
Right.
And it's so hard, because it's like, they're coming at it with such fire.
Yes. Yeah. And it's how are you gonna change their minds?
Right.
You probably,
and it's not that, and we probably won't, but your comment about the fact that this is, we have to be aware of how bad some of this stuff is, whether it's a female in woodworking, or a gay guy in boat building, or whatever. It's the fact of the matter is that there's still this level of toxicity that is oftentimes just kind of swept under the rug.
Yeah. It's sad. I didn't know you also lost a bunch of followers. I mean, it's also not surprising.
I literally don't care. And it was, I think Tyler was like, hey, I mean, at least you got rid of the bad ones.
Yeah, I feel like that sometimes too. It's like the cockroaches come out of the woodwork. So like once a year I'll post something gay and I'll lose like 1,000 or 2,000 followers. And I'm like, all right.
See you later.
All right, fine. Like they left, and okay. But I also feel like there's a certain responsibility that people like me probably have to help bridge this divide in our country somehow. And when I had my chat with Nick Offerman, he said one of the most interesting things. So when he played, on Parks and Recreation, he was Ron Swanson, and he said it reminds everyone of their jackass, bigoted uncle. And so it was a very beloved character. But he said he also took a real responsibility that he could speak to all audiences. And if Ron Swanson or Nick Offerman says, hey, maybe gay people are just humans, and maybe black people are just like the rest of us, that maybe people would listen to that.
Right.
And I took a bit of a leap, and I'm really glad I did. A few weeks ago, I went on a podcast called The Order of Man.
Oh, yeah.
With the host Ryan Mickler.
Yep.
And he's got an enormous following. Like, he just had Matthew McConaughey on there. And, I think a lot of people would not expect that Ryan and I would be friends, or that we would have shared values, and that we would find things to talk about masculinity and manhood and canoe building. We connected because he's building a canoe with his son. And someone sent him my profile and said, oh, you're building a canoe. You should look at this guy, Trent. And so he reached out to me, and, I was like, oh, great. A dad building a canoe with his son. How wonderful. But then I learned more about his philosophy and sort of his, the reason why he has social media and YouTube and used it very effectively. And I think a lot of his followers probably maybe are not big fans of the LGBT community, let's say. But we did a podcast together, and he said it's one of his most downloaded of all time.
I believe it, yeah.
Because people were like genuinely like, oh, Oh, okay.
If
Oh, like a
Ryan,
gay guy built a canoe?
yeah,
Oh, okay. All right, great. Oh, Trent. Oh, and it wasn't like that was we didn't even talk about that in the podcast. And some of my gay friends were like, "Why didn't you even bring it up?" And I said, I didn't want that to be the focus because I think it's so important that more and more people um, just see me as a person who maybe builds boats,
hmm
and that's not the thing I lead with. Because I know a lot of these people are so kind of passionate in their beliefs that if they knew right off the bat in the first second that I was gay, they would have turned it off
right.
or unsubscribed or whatever. So
It's
I don't know if we'll ever get there, but
I mean, I would like to. I'd like to be optimistic and think we would, but
yeah,
I think what you're saying, it's like to discredit everything right off the bat. It's like you almost want to like let me prove to and which you shouldn't have to for the record, but it's like it's
right,
like let me prove real quick who I am, and then we can talk about my personal love
yeah,
life if you choose, and
right,
it's it's just so wild to me, and the lunacy behind it, and the lack of support and hate is just
yeah,
enormously frustrating. And this is coming from a very straight white man,
yeah.
and
Yeah, no, I have, you're an ally and I appreciate you very much because we need people like you to just help us kind of, be taken seriously and normally and not sort of
I
ostracized. And
think that, I mean, that goes for Tyler and John, like, and all three of us, like, that's, we want to approach this and like Offerman, right? Make sure that we're putting the right foot forward at all times and
hmm
supporting everyone, and and being an
yeah,
advocate, for what is right. And that's, oftentimes can be very difficult, but in a situation like this is frankly very easy.
yeah. I will say um, that there's a phrase that we used, my editor and I have used in when I wrote my book. It's a phrase I think commonly used in among gay authors, um, which is "don't spook the horses." And so, like, if you put on page one of your memoir, like a gay sex scene or something, or whatever, you will spook the horses. Like,
I
any guy who picks it up in a bookstore might be like,
I
"Whoa!"
think I think you should challenge. I think your next book, chapter 1, I'm gay. Chapter 2, I built a boat. Chapter 3.
Right. Just go right in and
Yeah.
spooking the horses. And it's not like a bait and switch, or I almost think of it like a Trojan horse because I wanted so much. I wanted my book to be like mainstream. I did not want it to be pigeonholed as a quote
Right.
gay book. And I told my publisher, HarperCollins, at the very beginning, the first day, I was like, if you market this as a gay book, I will not
Mhm.
write it. I'll give you your advance back. And I got a really handsome advance that was like 3 years of my work salary at my day job. It was shocking. And I was like, all right, now the pressure's on. But if you put this on the fucking bottom shelf with all those gay books that only gay people read, like, I'm not doing this. And they were very committed early on and so supportive and saying, we want to write your specific story and have it be universal. And that's what makes, I think, a story like this so powerful is that anyone can read it and find themselves in it. And we all, straight, gay, whatever, a lot of guys struggle with their relationships with their dad. And a lot of guys have lost a parent to cancer. A lot of guys struggle to find their place in the world and figure out who they are and who they want to be. And those are the bigger themes of the book that I'm really proud of. And in some ways, that's why I'm also really proud of like that podcast I did with Ryan Mickler, because I was like, yeah, I'm talking to this guy who it's like no one would ever think that I'd be on a split
Right.
screen with him. um, it's like oil and water, but like we need more of that in
Yeah.
this country. Like a big part of my book too was red state, blue state, like East Coast, Midwest. My dad's was a cattle rancher in South Dakota, and here I was living in New York and the Hamptons, and we need more, I think, of the melding of all of
That,
these
and people just
people and
need,
places.
it's the fact that people care so much is an issue. That you're that passionate about something that you don't believe in, where it's none of your business. Nobody's springing this on you. And I think that is why it's important. You don't need to write a book where that's the first thing that comes out of your mouth, because unless you're writing the book for those intentions and those reasons, it could be a side note, but that's not you said the universal principles there. That's not something that you need to come right out and say. And I think that there's just more important things, and people, what you do in your personal life and who you love, and it just shouldn't matter to everyone else. I don't get why, if you have enough in your life, which is probably not perfect, what's it matter what Trent's doing or who Trent loves or anything else like that? It blows my mind that affects people so much, that they get so angry and so upset about it, where it's like, I don't know, like, gay or not gay, I have so much shit in my life that if that's what you want to do, like, even if I cared about it, how do you have time to care about it that much? Like, who cares what Trent's doing, I know. It is. And again, like, bringing kids into it, this and that, like, I have children now. I have 2 daughters, and I want them to be happy. I want them to make decisions that they want that make them happy. And as long as it's a healthy, safe decision, they're not getting themselves in trouble or hurting or harming anyone else, I don't care what they do. And I'll love them and support them for it. And it's hard to be able to tolerate, like, the parents that you see that aren't accepting of their children or who they want to be and everything else, because I feel as a child, and as a young adult, and especially as a young man, you're looking for your parents' approval. You're looking for your father's approval, gay, straight, whatever you want to be. And that's so important in your formative years. And it's so tough to not have their acceptance or their approval. And it's really so important for your kids to be able to provide that for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the world needs more fathers like you. And this podcast is going to drop on Monday, right? The day after Father's Day. So speaking of universal values, this will be out after, I guess, the day after my appearance on CBS Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley, and a 6-minute segment on national broadcast. And I'm promoting the book, talking about the book and my life. But most importantly, I think CBS really wanted to tell a story on Father's Day, not just about a modern craftsman, but about someone who, during Gay Pride Month, struggled a lot with their relationship with their father and how they overcame that and still found forgiveness and love and reconciliation in their life. So hopefully by the time your listeners are listening to this, they can go to the CBS Sunday Morning Instagram or website and watch the clip. I haven't seen the whole thing yet when we're recording this, and they won't show me, so I'm going to be watching it live with everyone else, and I'm really excited. I hope it changes some lives and helps people see that you don't have to be just like a straight white dude to build things, and you also don't. How do I say this? There's a lot of dads out there that I think are going to find special motivation in this piece too. We have very limited time on this earth to tell the people around us that they're important to us. And
100%. Yeah. There's no second chance here.
No.
Trent, this was fantastic, man. I appreciate you being on for 2 hours.
It's already all done
on CBS.
Thank you.
I do have 2 questions.
It's done.
Oh, it's done. Yeah. Great job yesterday.
Thanks.
I do have 2 questions. You can choose to answer or not answer.
Okay.
Where'd you get the blue boots?
They're Red Wing. Yeah.
And what kind of glue do you use?
Oh my God. That's amazing. Look, I will reveal here, this is a world exclusive that now the world will know I use Type Bond 2. Type
Bond. You're gonna have to tell all your followers that to find out what kind of glue, you got to listen to the whole
I will.
Modern
That's such a
Craftsman
great
podcast.
idea. That shit went viral. Everyone was.
That was
only,
so
I
funny.
think only gay people use
so
Type on
funny.
2, though. I'm like a big Type on 3 man myself.
It's hilarious.
All right, Trent.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being on, man.
Thanks a lot, Nick. I appreciate it. Thanks, Tyler. It's been a lot of fun.
So yeah.
We'll chat soon.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Yeah, and it's just I think about all how many people would just take their dad passing the tools, shove them in the garage, and never do anything with it. But I think it really just attributes to him wanting to make something out of himself and really centering around this mindset of if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it at 100%.
It's the same thing as basically his career with the company that he is now.
Exactly.
There was really no incentive for him to make that a successful company other than for the fact that he wanted to create something or create the best wine.
He also could have said, I'll make a mediocre wine and take a bigger salary.
Exactly. But, I mean, the guy, assume, well, I guess it's a guy. I think he said it's a guy. Wanted it to be the best, and it wasn't about the financial return. And I think, there was financial security that entire time, and motivation, like he said, was just to be able to do something the best that he could do.
Well, until next week, who do we got coming up next week?
I don't know.
Unfortunately, John had audio troubles this week. We're back to square one with our audio technology. We got Danny Wang next week. If you guys don't follow Danny Wang on Instagram, he's got a couple of accounts, but his main design account is Danny Wang Design. But I think if you look up Danny Wang, he's also got one 750,000 followers, and he basically posts memes and funny videos and tells you what stocks to buy, not financial advice. But interesting designer that basically will travel anywhere to design. He's got projects in California and Las Vegas. I think he's got some in Florida. We'll find out more next week. Guys, you know where to find us on Instagram. Check us out. If you have any feedback, make sure you hit that Survey Monkey on our bio. If we're doing a good job, hit up iTunes, drop us a review. You know what? I keep saying that we're going to read them. We haven't read them in a couple weeks. Why not pull one up real quick? If I can keep just chit-chatting while I look for these reviews, I can scroll down and pull something up. Here we go. What were you going to say?
Probably reading them would be a little bit of incentive for people to leave reviews. Not that that's the reason, but to get people on there and leave reviews. It is important for us. We're not just review whores.
No. I mean, we got a couple not so great ones.
It's fine.
Actually, a 3-star, a 4-star, and most of them 5 stars. Appreciate that. Let me scroll down to this long one. Let's see what this 3-star is all about. All right. Came here for Norm, and I liked it so much that I went back and started from the beginning. Love the cat's interview so much. His truth and enthusiasm were infectious. Maybe he should be locked in a room with episode 118, Justin Fink, doom, gloom, antiquated thought process, fine home building. They should look inwardly to their process, aka death by meetings. Coming from a corporate computer science background to teaching, I have read and written lots of procedures that needed to be understandable from a 15-year-old ADHD teen. I'm having trouble reading this one. Old to stubborn, thought resistance. Might have to skip this one. I'm having a hard time reading it. I just don't know if I'm reading it incorrectly or if the sentences aren't put together. I don't know where he lives, but I want to see. Well, why are they 3 stars? I want to hear some feedback.
Blame Justin. It was going to be 5 and then Justin.
I guess. Damn. Can't wait for Benjamin Ueda episode. You guys are on the border at the times. Don't fall into this craft. It's a dying dark side. Sounds like it's actually very supportive, so I'm guessing the 3 may have been just, not thinking that we were perfect, which appreciative, but I would love that feedback on the Survey Monkey so we can kind of digest it and figure out. Then the most recent one, we got one from RC&R. Love the podcast. You guys really help put things in perspective for fellow builders. When I'm having a tough day at work, thinking I'm the only one dealing with these issues, it's comforting to listen to you guys, knowing others are dealing with the same issues. Keep up the great work, and thanks for taking the time out of your schedules to produce this content.
People love
Guys,
commiserating.
Yeah, that's seriously.
We do have podcasts where everyone's upbeat and...
We have had some pretty deep, gloomy podcasts.
Yeah, I feel like
recently.
it's when the three of us get together where we're just burnt out. And hey,
Yeah, but it's important. Let's peak up, peak down, and keep on trucking. All right, guys. Until next week. Appreciate you listening. As always, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Moulding and Millwork. In a world of ever-increasing lead times and escalating pricing, how about a product that gives you neither? That's right, even completely custom molding profiles are produced in just 2 weeks from Duration. And as other molding and siding product line prices continue to march upward, Durations remains the same. Get exactly what you want quickly, efficiently, and cost-effectively. And to learn more about Duration Polyash products, please visit their website at durationmillwork.com and be sure to check them out on IG.